So how do you take a school from looking like this
Doing with this.
to looking like this?
You were always the best student.
Well, that is what this video is about. Now, this is not just some fancy college theory or some classroom discussion that you might have at college. No, this is what we really did at our school. But before I get too far into the video, let's go and play that intro. Now, if you're looking for the backstory of why our school needed to change, I'll put the link down below for the first video connected to this that tells the story of what brought us to the point where we needed to make changes at our school. But just know, we did make some changes. And the ideas going into are this, that you got to be fair, firm, and consistent. And then the other part of it is this, you got to take care of the small stuff. Otherwise, the small things turn into big things. Think about your classroom, for example. A small thing, kid getting out of their seat. That is nothing that big. A kid gets out of the seat to sharpen the pencil. Big deal, right? But if you're in the classroom, you know how this goes. Kid gets out of the seat to sharpen their pencil. As they're walking, they poke somebody else. That person becomes upset. They start, kind of messing around with each other. Next thing you know, that it starts into an argument. The argument then turns into a fight, and it just starts snowballing, all from sharpening the pencil. Got to take care of the small things. You got to have small things in place to make sure your classroom runs smoothly. And in the school, you got to make sure you take care of the small problems before they turn into the big problems. So when I started diving into our school's rules, procedures, and discipline policies, it was what you would expect, right? I mean, we had rules. We had rules in place about no fighting, no horseplaying, no profanity, things of that sort. We had rules about that. But I thought, if we have rules about that, why do we seem to have so many problems regarding all those things? And think about your school, for example. I'm sure you have the same kind of rules that we have. Profanity, no fighting, no horseplay, all that. But how often does your school really enforce those rules? And why doesn't your school enforce those rules? And I know for our school, we had those in place, but I can tell things were not being enforced like they should have. So why was that happening? And so here's what I realized. We have currently right now in my school, or middle school in Southern California, we currently have 942 students. 942 students. Now, I'm not sure that's big or small for what you have. I mean, that's pretty much what I've been used to for my whole entire teaching career. But we only have 3 administrators. We have the principal, whose main job is to kind of handle the school things, such as, interaction with the district and parents and all that. But then we have 2 administrators that kind of more focus on discipline. We have the vice principal and the dean of students. So that leaves 2 administrations to 942 students. What is that? 470 students per administrator? How do you expect somebody to deal with discipline problems for 470 students? And it's impossible. And now, don't get me wrong. These administrators are great. I really think we have some of the best administrators around. But besides dealing with discipline, they're dealing with other things. They're going to the district for meetings. They're dealing with other things, attendance, and all this other stuff. So think, if that was you, if you're an administrator and you had to deal with 470 students discipline-wise, how are you going to pull that off? And our administrators were feeling the same burden that you or I would feel. It was not that they didn't care. It's not that they didn't want things enforced. It's just that they didn't have the manpower to do it. They didn't have the time, enough time in the day to do it. So how are we going to fix this problem? Because what would happen is they couldn't take care of the small stuff. They just didn't have enough time to take care of all the small stuff. And so those small things eventually will lead to big things. So that is what I had to take a closer look at. How can we help out our administrator? Right? How are we dealing with the discipline? And I listened to a guy named Alex Hormozy. I'm not sure if you know who Alex Hormozy is, but he mainly deals with businesses. And he talks about when he takes over business or helps a business grow, he looks for constraints. Where is that business finding constraint? What is stopping them from growing? And he gave a practical example of this. He says, let's say you're lifting weights. You're doing a deadlift, right? We're lifting big weights off the ground. Let's say you work your legs down, they're strong, and you can lift 700 pounds. Your legs can actually physically, 700 pounds lifted up. But your grip can only handle 500 pounds. So even though your leg can do 700 and you can actually deadlift 700 pounds, you won't be able to because the constraints to your hands are only able to do 500 pounds. So that is what you need to work on. And so I looked at our school, what were the constraints? Was it that security wasn't doing their part and calling out all the students that were having these, things that were coming up, horseplay and everything else? Was that the problem? Was it teachers that were the problem, that they weren't doing their job in the classroom and calling all students out on the discipline and everything else? Or was it the administration that they weren't doing their part enforcing all these different rules? I had to figure out where the constraints were at. So when I started asking all these questions and started taking a closer look, here's what I realized. It was all of it. Every part of that puzzle was filling a constraint. Let me explain in more detail. Security. So security, we have campus security. 942 students, 5 campus security is what we got. Once again, not the best ratio around. But their job is to handle what happens in between the periods. Their job is to handle what happens outside of the classroom. And they, as they're dealing with things, they felt, and when I started talking to them, they felt powerless. They felt that they could not enforce any of the rules. I mean, they can tell a student to go to class, but that is it. They could not issue any kind of consequences for students. And so they felt constrained, they felt limited on the influence they had over student behavior. So that was a constraint we needed to take care of. As teachers, and I know I felt this, what was the point of issuing consequences to students? Why send students up to the office? Because, at least my opinion was this, that they would be sent back with no consequences. And so as teachers, we started giving up hope. We started like, what is even the point of discipline? Because nothing will even happen anyways. So that was another constraint we had to take care of. And of course, the third constraint was administration themselves. Man, they wanted to take care of things. They wanted to deal with all the issues, but they simply did not have the manpower or the time to do that. So we went to work. Now, I want to give credit where credit's due. Our principal and our district has supported us so far in what we put into place. And I can tell you, we have seen changes. But this is what we started to do. Now, where we started from was this. We had one detention room during lunchtime. We have 2 lunches. 942 students, so split in half. We call it first lunch, second lunch. So we had one detention room first lunch and one detention room second lunch. But they're very sporadic, meaning that we didn't have it every single day. We had Friday school, after school Friday. Students would be assigned Friday school, but that was very sporadic. So we had some places to issue consequences for students, but they're very sporadic. It wasn't consistent. That is what we were missing. So that is what we started with. So we started with the lowest hanging fruit, at least in my opinion, the lowest hanging fruit, which was security needed to feel like we had their back. Security needed to have something to empower them to issue consequences. And so with the support of our administration, we bought detention slips for our security. That was it, detention slips. So what that meant was security, if the student was out of class when they shouldn't be, all security had to do was write them a detention slip. Bam, there we go. They now felt empowered. Something as simple as that now felt empowered. They thought they had to take a kid to the office, and then from there, the office had to issue a detention, and it became complicated and overwhelming for everybody. But now, security, they have detention slips, and if they see any behavior that's not as it should be, they can issue a detention. That alone opened up that constraint. For teachers, what we did was this: we communicated to them. We let them know that their voices are heard. That they do want there to be a consequence. If a student misbehaves in a class and they send a kid to the office or they issue any kind of consequence like a detention, it will be enforced. And we made it easy for that. This is already in place, but we made sure teachers were aware of it. There are 2 things. There's a referral, so a teacher can send a student up to the office with a referral if they really need a kid out of the classroom that quickly, or they can issue them a detention by filling out a Google form. Both of those are electronic, on the computer, ready to go. So we made it easy for them to issue a discipline, and we once again communicated that their discipline will be enforced and that we will have their backs. So that opened up the constraint for the teachers. And regarding administration, this was the largest constraint that we were able to take care of. So we started with one first lunch, inconsistent second lunch, inconsistent detention, we guaranteed that we were going to host students. So first lunch, here's what it looked like. First lunch, we had one teacher volunteer for first lunch. Now, I say volunteer, but in all honesty, praise to the district. They were willing to pay teachers extra duty time for this. So we had one teacher volunteer for first lunch, one teacher volunteer for second lunch. So we had 10 first lunch, 10 second lunch. We can host a total of 20 students is what we're able to do on a consistent basis. And it wasn't just the teachers putting effort into this. We had security, because think about it, we got 20 students that have detention. Wonderful. Okay, we can host 20 students. But the problem is, how do you get the kids to there? If you tell the kids to show up to detention, if you deal with middle school, the chances of that happening are very slim that they're going to show up. So we had to get security involved. So now security was picking up kids about 10 minutes before the bell would ring and bringing them to the detention room. So here's what we got going on. We got 2 teachers, one first lunch, one second lunch, and we got 5 security. So that's a total of 7 adults working on this detention program. But the thing is, we had to make sure the kids get their lunch. So we had to get nutrition involved. There's 5 people on the nutrition team. So in order to make this simple detention program work, so we can host a total of 20 students, we needed 2 teachers, 5 security, and 5 nutrition. That's a total of 12 adults to host 20 kids. That is a lot of work going into this. But the philosophy is this: if we take care of the small stuff, then we can avoid the big stuff. And so we put that into place and we were consistent with it. And things started to work a little. But if you have 942 students and you're really going to call out all the students and take care of the small stuff, 20 spaces is not enough space for detention. And so what we did from there is we went out and recruited more teachers. I begged, I pleaded, I even bribed, different story, teachers to come be part of this detention program. And they did. And they did. And I got to tell you, once we had all those teachers put in place, things really started to happen. And so now our current detention program, this is what it looks like. We got 4 teachers for first lunch, 4 teachers for second lunch. That's 8 rooms of detention that we can host. 8 rooms. That's quite a bit, right? If you have 10 kids in each room, you're looking at 80 detentions a day you can host. And you can do more than that if you need to. But the problem we ran into was this: how do we get the kids to the class? Now we have security, but they were only gather enough kids for 1 class. So we had to recruit 6 more teachers just to gather up the kids. So here's what we're looking at now. We got 8 teachers to host detentions, 6 more teachers, that's a total of 14 teachers now to gather up the kids. Then we got 5 from security and then 5 nutrition. So in order to make this happen, we have about 20 adults working together to make sure the kids get their food, get to the right detention room, and serve detention. But I gotta tell you, the changes have been incredible. And it all goes back to the philosophy: fair, firm, consistent, and take care of the small stuff so it does not become big stuff. And then the last kind of philosophy we incorporated into that was the 10-80-10 rule. The 10-80-10 rule goes like this, and I heard this from a podcast once again talking about business, but it goes like this: if you're in any kind of environment, you got 10% of the people that no matter what you do, just never really seem to go along with the program. You got 10%. And think about your classroom. I bet you got 10% of the students, no matter how hard you try, it just seems like you can't motivate them. And then you got 10% of students that no matter what you do are gonna get that A. But then you got this 80% in the middle, and that is the one that you're trying to move. And if you have things in place, and you have a classroom that runs efficiently, you have a classroom that's productive, what you're gonna see is that 80% start moving towards the higher 10%. And that is the same thing with the school. We knew that we're gonna have 10% that no matter what we do are gonna be excellent. 10% no matter what we do are still gonna cause issues, but the 80%, that was our focus. And if we're fair, firm, consistent, and we take care of the small stuff, that 80% of students are gonna start doing the right thing. And that is what happened. So the first problem that we tackled was this: it was tardies at our school. And let me tell you, the transformation is incredible. So if you want to hear more details on that transformation, watch for the next video coming out so you can actually see how this detention program worked with their issue of tardies.